On this episode, we grind it, beat it, play it, beat it, grind it, play it. Technologic. Like Daft Punk.
Yeah, I've heard of them. All right, let's just go.
Welcome to Save Every Universe. My name is Alec Garcia. I'm a dreamy bald guy who hangs out in the tower and does not much. And don't say I popped a bubble one time when the tower was getting invaded. That barely counts.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
That's it.
My name is Robbie. I'm an orphan who was taken in by a friendly village, but has now been cast out because the rusty sword I have found has brought monsters to the area. But it also may be the key to saving the world.
A rusty sword.
Yeah.
Is that like an old SNES RPG or something?
Yeah.
It is? Really?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, nice. And while I'm on a roll, I'm also going to say you were Sub-Zero last week.
Yeah. Specifically, though, from Mortal Kombat 2. Because you find out in Mortal Kombat 2 that the original Sub-Zero was killed by Scorpion.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So thus the rivalry.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're like his little brother, I think?
Right.
And that's the one that's in all the, I think after that.
Okay.
And I think there's a whole thing where he like comes back as an undead dude. I think he's one of the robots.
Yeah, there was all kinds of like story and lore that went with that game that I never really went into. Not until like Mortal Kombat 4. I remember Mortal Kombat 4 specifically, they gave you like a book that had all the moves, but it also had really cool character descriptions and stuff. And that, like, I don't think I ever really noticed any of that stuff until Mortal Kombat 4 on the 64, if I remember right.
I remember actually like, I mean, you get little tidbits, right? Just bio stuff and beating the game. Being like, oh, I wonder what all that means. And I like hung on every word of those as a kid. But last week we actually talked about arcade games, so it felt fitting to do a Mortal Kombat character. We had a guest, Tony. So, you know what?
I don't know who you know what though? Yeah, we don't know.
Oh, he was an amalgam. He said he was an amalgam of characters. So we'll have to get.
Well, he said I'm the hardest thing from point A to point B. It's really difficult or something. But at the end, he said, "Help me, player. You're my only hope." I think it was a old Star Wars game reference. Had to.
I felt like he was just the escort mission.
Oh, really?
I think that's what he was, but we'll have to ask him.
Yeah, I could see that. So we were right then.
I mean, yeah, there probably was one.
And last time I was Richard Miller from the original Time Crisis. And I guess he was in Time Crisis 1 and then one of the offshoot games maybe that came to PlayStation or something like that. But
I think he shows, doesn't he? You can't play him, but he shows up in 2, doesn't he?
I think he does show up.
He covers you.
But you're playing as a different duo.
Yeah.
So we talked about Time Crisis. We talked about laser light guns. We talked about fighting games, all kinds of good stuff. If you missed our arcade episode, definitely go back and check that out.
Yep. This week, though, we are talking about more of a idea piece, right? Would you say?
Yeah, we haven't done just a BS, you'll be dumber at the end of this episode for listening to us.
Ever.
No research.
We never do that.
All opinion. Yeah, we haven't done that in a while.
This is mostly of an opinion piece, though, I would say, because, for me, it started because if you missed last week, you missed the fact that I platinumed in God of War. Where I was bragging about it.
Yeah, and we were talking about off show about just like how satisfying it is to beat a game. Right. And that versus so many of these games now are going in the direction of games as service and yeah, just talking about the difference between the two. And it is an interesting topic. There's actually much more. I was like, yeah, games as service versus beating them. They're both good. But there's a little bit more to this topic, I think, once you dig into it. Yeah,
I completely agree. So it feels like the medium of gaming has shifted more towards games as a service. It was like kind of largely unheard of. It felt like 10 years ago, besides like MMOs, maybe some PC games, but games as a hobby was not really the norm. It was a full story beginning to end, traditional playthrough, you beat it, maybe you played through it again, maybe you did New Game Plus, maybe there were multiple endings. I mean, hell, Chrono Trigger had that way back when.
And even before shooters and stuff, the only thing that came close to a game as a hobby really was something like a Mortal Kombat or a fighting game or something like that you played and practiced over and over and over to get good at, and you would play competitively with your friends and that kind of thing. That was like the closest to that, but that's
like StarCraft too. Anything that was like a strategy game, anything you like played with your friends competitively, I would say. Like
where the competition changed and you could change your play style. That gave it the replay value to come back to, but it's not quite the same thing as like the game as hobby that's happening now with like loot shooters and where MMOs are now today and those kinds of things.
Right, and it's been kind of interesting to me because I was reading a lot of articles, I would say like a year and a half, 2 years ago, that were like the traditional style of games is dead.
Yeah, I think like one of the execs of EA or something said that like the single player campaign is dead. It's gone forever.
Yeah, and people were really skeptical with God of War.
And I think that's EA's wet dream though, because like the game as service is they can monetize it longer over time and sell microtransactions and sell DLC and add-on content instead of selling one big thing that takes a ton of time to develop, and then they put it out in the world and it's done, and then they have to go start over. It makes sense from a business perspective why EA would say that. I could see why they would want that, but I don't think it's true.
Right. Well, so then God of War, they came out and they said there's not going to be any DLC, like paid DLC.
Right.
As of this recording, they just came out with a New Game Plus, but that's free. So, and I remember when they announced that for God of War, people were like, these guys have lost it. They're living in the past. Yeah. That's a dead way of doing games. Yeah. And then God of War killed it and made tons of money, super successful.
I think that's a cool, and maybe we can get into this a little bit more down the road of this conversation, but I think that's a cool aspect of what's happening now. It's sort of like we talked about with East versus West, and it used to be sort of a hard dichotomy a little bit more, or there was a time when it was a little bit more of a firm, this side is this side, that side's that. And now they're influencing each other. And I feel like that's what's happening now. There was this big push with like EA and everybody, like single players are dead and, you know, games as service, social gaming, that's the way of the future. And now it's like coming back a little bit more toward a middle ground, and they're starting to just influence each other. So like, even though God of War is like a really extreme example of single player, no DLC, even that they just released the New Game Plus, and the New Game Plus like added new gear. I think they added a new enemy type or a variation on enemy types or something like that. Right. So even that is like a games as service-esque update to a very standalone single player experience.
Sure. I mean, Breath of the Wild added payable DLC, which I liked it, but it was weird to see like DLC for Zelda,
from Nintendo. Yeah.
There was another example I'm thinking of. Final Fantasy 15, another example where it was like a complete story, but man, they've been updating 15 this whole time. Yeah. They're still releasing like some paid, some free content, adding new vehicles. They added episodes for all the side characters. Right. I think now you can change, or they're coming out with an update where you can change Noctis's appearance. Like, that was a single beginning to end story driven game that now has obviously been influenced by this games as a service.
So, well, and I think to a degree they'd be foolish to not take advantage of it. We've talked about the conversation a lot of the times is like now anyways, like people throwing out games that aren't finished and like, oh, we'll fix it in DLC, we'll fix it with a patch, we'll this or that. And that's like the bad way to go about it. But when you make a great game like God of War or Breath of the Wild, you'd also be foolish to not take advantage of that technology and that ability to do that, to just continue to improve it and add value over time as well. So I mean, if you think about this from like old PC gaming, players did this. They just modded it. They loved this game. They wanted to keep playing it. They were happy to return to it. So they just modded it. They created new variations. And, so now for the company to be like, you know what, we should be making a little money off of that, doing it ourselves, doing it right. I mean, it makes sense. So I remember first feeling this tension between games as a service versus like just one-off standalone games. Yeah. I had a friend who was like a big retro gamer, loved The Witcher before Witcher 3 came out, like was favorite game. He loved buying these kind of indie type games on Steam, and he kept saying, you need to play this, you need to play that, you need to play this. And I was playing games like World of Warcraft. I was like, I don't have time. I'm playing this one game. And like, we wouldn't see each other that often. We'd meet up and he'd be like, so what games have you beat? And I'd be like, oh, well, I progressed through the raid in World of War. Like, I didn't have a list of games I had beat. And like, it was weird because we were both gamers and suddenly it felt like we had this huge chasm between us, right? I've felt that, sort of, we've had that in our conversations. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I played through Detroit. I played through this and that and that. And you're like, oh yeah, no, I've been doing the raid every week. And like, okay.
Yeah, all my time gets eaten up by
and we
Destiny.
play about the same amount of time, and often you play even more than I do, but you're really sinking time into one game and investing in one world, and I bounce around and beat a lot of stuff.
Especially because you didn't used to play games as a service like at all.
No, this is I had some notes about that. Like, this is a different experience for me. And I think the reasons why I've gotten sucked into it, like you had some stuff in your notes about part of why you like that is like the empire is the phrasing that you used, like building your empire over time of like having all the gear and all the emblems and all that stuff. I never have cared about that ever until very recently with this new generation, because I love shooters and I didn't like games like
World of Warcraft.
Or like as far back as you want to go, EverQuest. I'm not a big like fantasy guy. But I love shooters, and now that loot shooters are sort of bridging that gap of giving you the habitual addictive play to come back to with shooting shit, I'm all on board with it.
Did you see like Battlefield 5 is talking about like customizing your squad, like every character you play, and they've done this whole thing about do these things now in Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 1, and you're going to take that stuff into Battlefield 5. That's a good example of a game that's like trying to bridge that gap, I think.
Yeah, well, and Call of Duty, I think, was one of the ones that really pioneered that. Like I remember I guess they did it in Modern Warfare 2 probably, but Black Ops 1 is the one where I really remember getting, like, I got hooked into like the progression system and unlocking guns and prestiging and doing the challenges inside of it. I played that game habitually like a game, and I think they did some of that RPG progression game as service style stuff with, I think they were one of the first ones to really do that. And then games like Destiny and Division really took that to a whole nother level in blending MMO RPG stuff into it.
You know, it's interesting, when I played these games as a service initially, I never think like, oh, I can't wait to have this legacy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you don't really think that on the outset.
Yeah.
But once you've been playing it for a couple years and you start hearing about expansions and sequels, you start being like, well, what about all this shit I've done? Like, what about my accomplishments? I've put time into this. Yeah. I've blown off dates with my wife to do this. You know what I mean? Like, I better have something to show for it in Destiny 2 or whatever going forward. Yeah. I think, and like we talked about with Jimmy on the MMO episode, I mean, WoW has done that tremendously well. And it gives you dates and time.
But I mean, like the recent Destiny stuff, like I said, like I never, even in Destiny 1, like I played it regularly, but I never really got into it. But for some reason now I'm like, I gotta get the Solstice armor. I gotta buy the t-shirt. I don't know what the deal is. Like, I'm hooked. I'm on board. I've been playing the Division again. I'm excited for Anthem. Like, I'm kind of, now that we're in a shooter realm that does that, I'm now like an MMO nerd.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting too, because standalone games rarely do that. Except when, like, they don't do that, except when they do. And what I mean by that is, like, there are games like Suikoden, where you could import your file on your memory card from Suikoden 1, and that's just like a glimpse into that dynasty carrying forward, but it was so satisfying
to see.
Give
you a continuity of playing a series across multiple installments.
Mass Effect, of course. Like, the BioWare games have done that pretty well for a while with Mass Effect and Dragon Age, and, like, creating the tapestry online for the Dragon Age stuff. And you feel that going forward, but it's still in a one-off, so to speak, right? But I think that type of game lends itself nicely to the kind of a hybridized version of this, because it has so many different storylines and variations that you want to play through it multiple times. Yeah. So being able to combine the dynasty of playing all of those games up until now with multiple playthroughs and a satisfying story and characters, I think is fills me with glee every time. Like, even just thinking about it right now, I'm like, well, I'll see. I'm going to go play Mass Effect. Like, it's such a cool idea. I mean, it's complex, but really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it does give you a sense of legacy or continuity or whatever you want to call it, that your time wasn't wasted with one game. If they can extend that across into the years. Like, people have been playing WoW. Like, there's a new expansion out, and some people have been playing that for over 15 years now. Is that right?
I think it's close to that.
Yeah, or it's around 12, 15 years. That's right. Those are hobbyist people that have been doing that for over a decade. That's incredible.
One of the points I wanted to make was, when I play a game like a one-off, like Zelda, Last of Us, Uncharted, whatever, God of War, I tend to reflect on that story and those characters, and I think about those things, and like, just like you would like a book or a movie or something, right? Yeah. I find myself through my day-to-day life thinking about that. Yeah. When I had an interesting thought, though. I'm Destiny 2 Forsaken is about to come out, right? Yeah. And I had a similar, instead of reflecting on how Destiny has been, I started reflecting on who I have been since playing Destiny. It causes a completely different type of reflection. I don't think about, wow, you know, Zavala really said something profound back at the end of Destiny 1. I don't think about that, right? But I do think about, like, damn, I've had 2 kids. Like, I remember, like, going through surgery and playing Destiny 1. Like, I start reflecting on these moments in my life. Yeah. And I used to do the same thing with, like, World of Warcraft, or I do it with 14. Games as a service that I've been playing for years caused me to think about how I'm different since
the beginning of this journey.
Which is actually kind of a weird, like...
I restarted, because I hadn't restarted a character on The Division, and I wanted to do it since they've made all these changes. So I started a character when the game launched, and I played that character until recently, and I went back and started one. And going back and playing those old missions, I had the same experience where I was like, man, like, remember back when we were so excited for this game to come out, and that was, I mean, like, I think I was just barely married and no kids, like that kind of stuff. I was like, it's bizarre to think about, and this game has come forward with us, like, through all these different things. It's very strange. But I agree with you, and the one-off games cause you to reflect more on like big literary theme type stuff, right? Like, you walk away thinking like, wow, that was a difficult decision that character made, and you bond with them, and you go through this structured emotional experience, much more like reading a novel.
Sure.
Or something.
You mourn the loss of characters.
Yeah.
I think about these big moments, still get emotional about it, like you would.
There's an intimacy almost when, like, with Joel and Ellie playing through The Last of Us, like, as many times as I've played that, the connection I feel is with those characters and with that emotional journey. When you're playing something like WoW or Destiny or The Division or whatever, your connection is with your friends more than anything else.
Right. Which is why you get that like weird reflection, social. Right. It's weird to think that it causes you to reflect on your real life.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
is strange. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, kind of in that same vein too, is as I was thinking about this comparison, I realized when I beat a game, like, it has a sense of completion, right? But when you stop playing a game as a service, it feels a little like a breakup. Not necessarily like you pointed out in your notes, like, not a horrible breakup, but like...
Well, I think it depends. Like, with The Division as an example. Like, we played it, we were excited, I loved the campaign even at launch, but then there was just no end game, and we tried to play it, and tried to go through it, and tried to get into the dark zone, and it was just kind of So it wasn't like this, like, oh man, she broke my heart. It was more of like a, hey, whatever happened to that girl? Like, oh yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard from her in a while. It was more like that. It was like this slow fizzle out that you just sort of forget about. Like, at best, that's what it is. At worst, like...
Sometimes it is kind of a bad breakup.
Like, a lot of people who bailed on Destiny was over very, like, in terms of trust between player and developer.
That's
some pretty serious things that really piss people off. Or EA with Battlefront and stuff like that.
Right. And when you ask them, like, oh, do you play Destiny? Don't bring her name up. We don't talk about her in this house. I've moved on. I'm happy now. Yeah. You know, she didn't treat me the way she should have, and I don't ever want to hear...
Because it is this, like, habitual part of your life. Like, you're used to seeing this, like, quote, person at the end of every day that you, like... or at least most of the week, right?
Yeah.
A couple times a week, and all of a sudden it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought we had something special, and she clearly didn't feel the same way. Like, it is.
That's kind of how some of the conversations are about, like, people who got burned by Bungie.
I don't feel like I've ever stopped playing an habitual game quite that angrily.
Yeah.
But people definitely experience that.
Yeah.
I've had some bad, maybe WoW breakups. But you know, all of my breaks with games as a habit type, whatever, video games tend to be more because of social reasons. Right. If I'm mad, it's not really Bungie's fault. It's not Blizzard's fault. It's because my friends were assholes. And
you had a group that you played with, and then something happened where you just...
That's at least my experience. I still haven't really felt that too much, but the more heated I get, it's more because of a person, not because of a developer.
Right, yeah, I would agree with that.
Let's talk about your experience with these games as an authority. You want to do that? You know what I mean? Like, okay, you want me to rephrase that?
Yeah. I think this is... Okay, so you had this in your notes. Can I read what you said?
Yeah, go ahead.
I also feel like I have more of an authoritative view on a franchise developer and typically the genre when I've actually played all the way through a game, talking about completing like a one-off game. I think it was the context, right?
Yeah.
The person who only got a few hours in is never reliable.
Have you had that conversation with the person who you're like, so how do you feel about Zelda? What'd you think of Breath of the Wild? Well, I think it's overrated.
Yeah.
Oh, you do? Yeah. Well, how far did you get? Well, I just got a few hours in.
Right.
I'm like, you son of a bitch. Like,
I thought, because like I thought Zelda was good, and I was like, okay, this is cool, like cool open world stuff. And then I got to the first like big dungeon with the big moving monster, and I was like just floored and hooked. And that game is a masterpiece. Like, sometimes you have to get to a certain point with a game. So
I've also had the opposite true though in a game as a service where I'm like, dude, so. In fact, you and I have had this argument a little bit recently with Destiny.
Yeah.
Where I was like, I'm really frustrated with Destiny. You're like, dude, it's over. You're building it up. It's not that bad. I'm like, oh yeah, how many times have you done Spire of Stars?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't yet. Well, what about Escalation Protocol? Have you dealt with that bullshit? And
I play a lot, but you do like you do the raids more.
Right. And so then you're like, well, I haven't done any of that. I'm like, well, don't even talk to me about how it's not that bad until you've played the whole game, right?
Yeah.
And not just at you, though. I've had that experience with people who play WoW, with people who play any of these games as a service where they're like, it's fine. People overreact. And I'm like, oh, well, what level are you? Well, I'm level 20. Yeah. Shut up. Don't even talk to me until your end game running raids.
Yeah.
Running extreme modes.
It's so relative, though, right? Because I was thinking about it. Even we were playing Ghost Recon Wildlands last night, and and we were talking about it, and we were running through some of the DLC, and Jimmy, who's been on the show before, was a little prickly because we didn't wait for him. We had ran one mission in the DLC, then didn't wait for him. Yeah. It was fair. We should have waited for him, but but he's like, you guys should have just gone and like did the campaign and killed some of the bosses over there because Robbie hasn't finished that. And like, I got this like, ew, like, what are we, like, he hasn't even finished it. So like, okay, so you don't play this game? Like, what is happening here?
So,
and it's such a stupid game we play casually anyway, but like, I think if there's a game that you like and you care about and you play regularly and you've like beat all this stuff, there's like an expectation like this is a good game. Why the hell wouldn't you
haven't you beat all the stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in my defense, we were running even the main campaign together.
Yeah.
And then one day I logged in and you and Jimmy were like independently on your own, not together, not without me, just by yourselves. We're like, we went in deep, dude. We went down there. We stopped the cartels. I'm like, I thought we were just doing it together. And then you guys were like, well, we don't want to play anymore. We beat it.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I didn't beat it yet.
Yeah.
Well, come on, we're going to go play Far Cry. Like, it felt like everyone moved on. And I was like, well, I played it with my friends. Now I'm not going to play it by myself. But yeah.
But I think that happens.
I should say, it's a fiction, right? Everyone who has put some time into the game really does have something to say about it. Their voice should be heard. It's not fair that I'm going to like shut down.
So I think with like games as service or games that have a shallow narrative like Ghost Recon Wildlands or the Division, any of those, like it kind of doesn't matter. And if you've experienced like the mechanics of the game to a certain point, you get the game, right? Yeah. I think it is different with like a one-off narrative game, right? Like with God of War, it was basically not worth us having a conversation about God of War until you finished it because you had to see the thing in its complete entirety.
Yep.
And we could talk like, oh, aren't the mechanics good? Yeah, they're really good. That's the end of the conversation. But with a game like that, that's like, I mean, at least 50% of it is the story and the big set piece moments and the characters. And I had to wait for you to finish it before we could talk about any of that. So it's like someone who's put in 2 hours into God of War or Red Dead or anything like that, you might as well not have the conversation at all with that person unless they're going to finish the whole thing because there's so many other things you just can't talk about.
You can say things like, how do you like it so far?
Mm-hmm.
What part have you gotten to? That was a good part.
Yeah.
Isn't that a neat thing with a horse? Yeah. Cool.
I mean, in that way, it is much more similar to reading a novel. Like you say, they're like, I'm reading it. Cool. How many pages are you in? I'm like 20, 30 pages in. Okay. I'll talk to you in like a couple of weeks about it. Like,
yeah.
Cause you don't want to, it's out of respect too. Like you don't want to, it's not just an authority high horse thing. It's like, it's out of respect. It's like, you just don't want to talk to that person until they're done and you can actually have like a intelligent conversation about what they reflect on. Like you said, it brings up things that you think about and reflect on. And like, there's things you take away from the story. You can't talk about that with anybody until they've actually finished the damn game.
Right. Well, they have to go on the same journey you did.
Yeah.
Right. Otherwise, they're not there yet.
And then it's a cool conversation because you can talk about like, oh, well, like my favorite moment was this because of this, the arc of this character or when that character died. And then some people are like, I didn't give a fuck about that guy. I liked the part that happened after.
Yeah.
And you can really have an interesting discussion about what they took away from that exact same narrative experience versus what you did.
Right.
And
that's not as true with a game as a service though.
Right.
Not as much.
No, it's more about the experience it's about the shared experience. It's about the experience you have together instead of digesting something and then, you can discuss it later or talk about it later. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the last points I wanted to make about this topic was just, I really like, I like that games as a service have a social aspect to them because it gives me freedom to do stuff with my friends, right?
Right.
And if there was only games that were one-offs, I would be sad because I like playing games with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say like I wish there was a second Link running around in Breath of the Wild with me, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's not how that experience was designed to be, and I really wouldn't necessarily. Actually, Breath of the Wild would probably be kind of fun, but you get what I mean, right? God of War would be really weird, even if somebody was playing as Atreus.
Yeah. So they are different. Being online, having a mic, socializing while you're gaming is a wonderful experience. But if I had someone chatting in my ear the whole time I was playing The Last of Us, I would flip out, right? Because there's a presence and an intimacy you have with just experiencing that story by yourself.
Yeah, I've had a little bit of a spat with my brother because I'll be playing God of War.
Yeah.
And he's playing something else.
He wants to join a party.
And talk. I'm like, well, do you have something to say to me? Because like,
just text.
I'm playing God of War, and he's like, oh, I thought we could play together.
Yeah. And
I'm like, God, I don't want to be a dick, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Like, it really is like if you were sitting on the couch reading a novel, would you want someone to come sit next to you and just talk in your ear the whole time you were trying to read? I think that's a fair.
As somebody who's married.
Right.
My answer is
no further comment. But like, I think that's a fair comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. And I think there's maybe people who don't appreciate the narrative as much of a game don't notice that as much or whatever, but at least games like that, I really kind of want to be left alone to experience the game, experience the environment. The music is a big thing to me. Like, I know some people, I don't know, don't care about the sound of the music. I have to have the music. I want to see what they designed and crafted for this moment.
The music in an epic moment that is a really meaningful moment in a narrative game matters, dude. It's carefully crafted just for that moment, typically.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting seeing how some of this blends together. When you and I were playing that mission we were playing in Wildlands last night, and you didn't have your mic.
Oh yeah.
And I thought we were gonna do worse. We did better.
Yeah.
And I think it's because
it was tight, man. We ran some clean ops.
I think it's because we weren't being jackasses and screwing around.
Yeah.
And we had to actually pay attention. Like, I had to be like, he's
actually,
over there.
And actually watch each other's behavior and then like predict it and plan for the other person. And dude, we crushed it.
Yeah. Without talking. And as soon as then we got on mic, and then we just
shit show.
Yeah, it was a total shit show. We did horrible. That was like the best we've ever done, and it was when we were off mic.
Yeah.
Which was just a side note there. I don't know what that says about communication, but I do appreciate that some of these games are like kind of hybridizing this, like games like Wildlands or Far Cry is a good example.
Far Cry is a good example, I think, as well. And Far Cry was one of those, Far Cry 5, I loved that game. I loved the story. I loved the characters. I'm glad I played through it solo with no interruption. But now it's really, like as an end game activity, it's fun to like go back and replay through stuff in a co-op style. And then they've released DLC. There's Far Cry Arcade where they're adding stuff. So yeah, that's a good example. Far Cry 5 is another good example of the hybridization.
Yeah. Now, I haven't played through Far Cry by myself. Yeah. I'm only playing through with you.
I mean,
and you're being fairly respectful, though. It's not like you're yammering during the cutscenes. Like,
sometimes I'm like, oh, dude, this part's crazy.
Yeah, you'll say like, oh, I forgot about this, and that's it. It's not like I'm like going through visions of the bliss, and you're like, oh yeah, so anyway, dude, so did you see that news article that just came out? You know, you're not like talking.
I loved those moments so much, and I thought they did such a good job with the characters in that game that I want you to experience it just like I had the opportunity to.
But for the most part, like, it hasn't hindered it.
I should
be
less respectful to you. That's what I've learned. That's my takeaway from this.
No, don't take that away. Far Cry has been a cool experience though of both, right? Where it is story
and Wildlands is like that as well. But
yeah.
Go ahead.
So I guess what I just kind of want to close here is I don't mind the hybridization. It's cool.
Yeah.
But I still like these as separate entities. Playing through games like God of War, Witcher, whatever is nice, and I want to be able to do that by myself.
Right.
So I hope that the success of games like Breath of the Wild and God of War, that we keep seeing these really strong narrative, continued to be one-off type games, and not everybody going after the like games of service.
I agree with that. Like, I think both offer so much in terms of experience that like there are cool hybridizations, but there are some times where it's like it would be a bad idea. Like if they came out and announced Last of Us 3 is going to be like an online shared world, like I would flip out, man.
Yeah, you wouldn't want
like
that.
That's not why you play that game, right? And so, but games of service, the social experience, the grandness of like being able to like run big raids with friends and stuff, like that's so freaking cool. And so it's not good or bad. It's just like we've talked in the past, like the developers really need to know what type of experience they're like trying to create, and they need to just go 100% to creating that the best they can, just like God of War did. No apologies. It's a campaign, no bullcrap on the back end. Here you go. Thank you for listening to Save Every Universe. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to support us, you can do so on patreon.com/Save Every Universe. Even $1, we would like to have it. I mean, helps us out.
You can also now pledge through the Podbean app, which is something we're native on, the Save Every Universe Podbean app. Or if you have any questions for us or have an episode idea you'd like to hear us talk about, you can reach us at saveeveryuniverse@gmail.com.